Welcome to the Zombie Story Zone. In the desolate wastelands of the desert, survival isn't guaranteed, not against the blistering sun, not against the relentless thirst, and certainly not against the undead. Tonight, we're diving into a bone-chilling tale of isolation, desperation, and terror as survivors in a forgotten desert town battle. The rising tide of a zombie apocalypse. The undead are evolving, the resources are running out, and trust is a luxury no one can afford. Will they outlast the nightmare? Or will the desert swallow them whole? If you're ready for a heart-pounding story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button, make sure to subscribe to the Zombie Story Zone, and press the bell icon so you never miss a terrifying new tale. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow zombie enthusiasts and leave your comments below. We'd love to hear your theories, thoughts, and chills. Let's step into the apocalypse together. Now, brace yourself, it's time to begin.
The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, an unforgiving expanse of shifting dunes and jagged rocks under a sky that seemed to press down with unrelenting heat. The town of Arroyo Creek had always been isolated, its few hundred residents relying on a lone, rickety water tower and an ancient generator to survive. But isolation wasn't their biggest problem anymore. It was the zombies. 2 weeks ago, the first reports came through on the battered radios in town. Cities were falling. First Phoenix, then Albuquerque. Some kind of sickness was spreading fast, turning people into mindless, ravenous creatures. The desert seemed like a refuge, at least at first. The creatures didn't seem to fare well in the heat or open spaces. But when supplies started to dwindle, the cracks began to show. That's when the survivors in Arroyo Creek realized that the biggest danger wasn't just the undead, it was each other. The sun was a molten ball sinking into the horizon, casting long shadows across the town's main street. Jake Harper crouched behind an overturned truck, sweat dripping from his brow and soaking his shirt. His hand tightened around the grip of his battered shotgun, the weapon's barrel reflecting the orange glow of the fading light. Beside him, Ellie, a wiry teenager with wild, dark hair and sharp eyes, scanned the street through a pair of binoculars. "They're getting closer," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the dry wind. Jake followed her gaze. 5 shambling figures emerged from the far end of the street, their movements jerky and unnatural. Their skin was cracked and blistered, peeling away to reveal raw muscle beneath. Despite the distance, Jake could hear the low, guttural groans that sent shivers down his spine. "We can't stay here," he muttered, glancing back toward the building behind them. The old general store was their best bet for water and supplies, but the front door was jammed, and breaking in would make too much noise. "We'll have to circle around." Ellie nodded, but her eyes lingered on the zombies. "They're faster than the ones we saw yesterday. I don't think the heat's slowing them down anymore." Jake swore under his breath. That was bad news. The desert had been their one advantage. The relentless sun and arid conditions keeping the undead sluggish and less aggressive. If that was changing, they were in trouble. He motioned for Ellie to follow and crept along the side of the truck, keeping low. They slipped into a narrow alley between the store and a dilapidated garage, the air thick with the stench of decay. Jake paused at the corner, peeking around to ensure the coast was clear. "I hate this place," Ellie muttered. "Feels like everything's waiting to jump out at us." "Stay sharp," Jake replied. "We'll get what we need and get out." The plan had been simple: head into town, scavenge supplies, and return to the makeshift camp on the outskirts. But nothing ever went according to plan anymore. Arroyo Creek was a graveyard, its streets littered with broken glass, abandoned vehicles, and the occasional desiccated corpse. The survivors had learned to move quickly and quietly, avoiding unnecessary risks. As they reached the back of the general store, Jake spotted a small window, its glass already cracked. He carefully wedged his knife into the frame, prying it open with a grunt of effort. "Ellie, you're up." She hesitated for a moment before handing him the binoculars and climbing through the window. Once inside, she signaled for him to follow. Jake squeezed through, landing with a thud on the dusty floor. The store was dark, the air heavy with the smell of mildew and rot. Shelves stood half empty, their contents scattered in the chaos of the initial outbreak. "Water first," Jake said, keeping his voice low. "Then food if we can find it." Ellie nodded and moved toward the back of the store, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Jake stayed close, his shotgun at the ready. He couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The silence was too perfect, too oppressive. Ellie let out a muffled cheer when she found a stash of bottled water in a corner. "Jackpot," she whispered, stuffing as many bottles as she could into her backpack. Jake grabbed a few as well, his eyes darting toward the shadows at the edge of the room. A sudden crash shattered the silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of groaning. Jake spun around, his flashlight revealing a zombie stumbling toward them from the rear storage area. Its eyes were milky white, and its jaw hung at an unnatural angle. "Move," Jake barked, raising his shotgun. He fired, the blast echoing through the store as the zombie crumpled to the ground. The sound was deafening, and Jake knew it would draw more of them. Back to the window, Ellie yelled, already sprinting toward their exit. Jake followed, his heart pounding as the groans outside grew louder. The dead were closing in, drawn by the noise. Ellie climbed out first, her feet hitting the ground, just as a group of zombies rounded the corner of the store. Jake tossed her the backpack and turned to fire another shot, buying himself a few precious seconds to escape. He scrambled through the window, landing hard on the dirt below. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing Ellie's arm and pulling her toward the alley. They sprinted past the truck and back onto the main street, dodging around obstacles as the undead gave chase. The water bottles clinked loudly in their packs, each step feeling like an eternity. The sun had fully set by the time they reached the outskirts of town, the stars glittering coldly in the vast expanse above. Their camp was a small, makeshift affair nestled between a cluster of boulders. A battered tarp provided scant protection from the elements, and a circle of stones marked where they dared to light a fire on rare occasions. "Did you get it?" a voice called as they approached. Nora, a middle-aged woman with streaks of gray in her hair, stepped out of the shadows. She held a rifle in one hand, her expression tense. "Water and a bit of food," Jake replied, handing her one of the bottles. "But we ran into trouble. They're getting faster." Nora's face hardened. "That's the last thing we need." Inside the camp, the others were waiting. There were only 5 of them left now: Jake, Ellie, Nora, a quiet man named Luis, and his younger brother Mateo. They had all lost so much, their loved ones swallowed by the chaos of the outbreak. But in this harsh new world, there was no time to mourn. As they divided the supplies, Jake couldn't help but notice how thin Mateo looked. The boy, no older than 10, sat close to his brother, his wide eyes fixed on the food. Jake passed him a granola bar, earning a grateful smile from Luis. "We need a better plan," Nora said, breaking the silence. "The water tower won't last much longer, and the town's running dry. If the zombies don't get us, thirst will." "There's an old ranch about 5 miles west," Jake offered. "Might be a well there. It's risky, but it could buy us some time." Ellie frowned. "What if it's already overrun?" Jake sighed. "Then we'll deal with it. We don't have a choice." The group fell silent, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. The desert offered no sanctuary, only the faint hope that somewhere out there, salvation might exist. As the night wore on, Jake took the first watch, his shotgun resting across his lap. The stars seemed impossibly bright, their cold light casting eerie shadows across the sand. In the distance, he could hear the faint moans of the undead, a constant reminder that they were never truly safe. He glanced at his companions, their faces gaunt and hollow in the firelight. They were survivors, but for how much longer? The world had become a waking nightmare, and Jake knew that if they didn't find water soon, the desert would claim them all zombies or not. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faint scent of death. Jake tightened his grip on his weapon and stared into the darkness, his resolve hardening. They had survived this long. Somehow, they